Great, thanks, Kavanaugh. As Kavanaugh mentioned, my name is Seema Patel. I am the Program Manager for Fuels at the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves. So thank you, everybody, for joining. It looks like we have a good crowd and people continually entering the forum as I'm going to continue to talk. So I'm just going to keep going, but as Kavanaugh mentioned, as questions arise, please go ahead and type them into the chat window, and we will try to get to them as time allows. So just continuing to move forward, I'm just going to go over quickly the agenda. So I'm going to start out with a brief overview of the Alliance. I think a lot of people who are joining the webinar today already know about the Alliance, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, and I really want to allow most of the time to dedicate to the enterprises and NEA to talk about this activity in particular. I'm going to give a brief overview of the Alliance and then the background of this particular project, just to give you sort of a picture and lay a foundation for what we're going to talk about today. Then I'm going to hand it over to Luke from NEA to give a bit of an overview of NEA and their capabilities. And then we'll go ahead and start with the presentations from each of the 3 fuel enterprises that will be speaking today. And then we'll pause for a few Q&As specifically addressed to the companies. And then we'll continue to talk a little bit about the Handbook for Fuel Enterprises, which is essentially a culmination of the key themes and key methodologies that were used to provide the capacity building support for each of the 3 enterprises. And we'll get into more detail later so this becomes a little bit more clear. Then we'll pause again and have questions on the handbook and any other general remaining questions. And then we'll wrap things up with just a few key upcoming events from the Global Alliance just that we want to make everybody aware of. So with that, I will turn things over to the overview just to talk a little bit about the Global Alliance as a whole. So the Global Alliance is a public-private partnership. We were founded in 2010. And we are now entering, and will be entering, the 3rd phase of our strategy in 2018. Throughout this entire time, our objective has and will continue to be in phase 3 to really create a thriving global market for clean cook stoves and fuels in order to address the persistent problem of indoor air pollution that impacts 3 billion people globally. We have a number of different principles, really core principles that we try to integrate throughout all of our work to spur adoption of various clean cooking solutions. Amongst those core principles are really the primacy of a market-based approach to reach and sustain scale, but also ensuring that vulnerable populations have access to clean cooking solutions. It's also a focus on high-quality approaches that can be really brought to scale. It's also a commitment to driving solutions and markets and innovations towards advanced and cleaner options over time. And then also it's a recognition of the importance of building the ongoing work, knowledge, and expertise of our sector partners. So I believe we're at over 1,700 partners now, and we recognize the importance of bringing new partners continually to the table to talk about the issue and help address a lot of the problems that you see here on this slide. So I wanted to also mention a little bit about why we're holding this webinar and why we're really honing in on fuels and fuel supply chains in particular. So we really can't look at this problem in isolation. The Alliance's strategy looks both at stoves and fuels to make sure that the 2 value chains are integrated and working together to maximize impacts as much as possible. And as we work across the Alliance's various impact areas and initiatives, we're trying to make sure at every step that every technology decision has a fuel lens over it. So within our core strategy at the Alliance, we are enhancing demand, strengthening supply, and providing an enabling environment for both stoves and fuels to thrive, but also very specifically focusing on optimizing fuel supply chains, which was a big motivation for the work that we're going to be presenting today. So as many of you know, the Alliance has 8 focus countries, and in those 8 focus countries is where we essentially dive a little bit deeper with different targeted interventions and support for clean cooking activities. But we do this across a broad range of stove and fuel types. So we're not just looking at one specific type of stove technology or one specific type of fuel, but across a broad range taking into account a number of different factors, including existing partners and enterprises that already exist in these various countries, strong consumer and political will, existing infrastructure and supportive policies, etc. So all of these are really drivers and motivations for why we work in these various countries. But what I also want to emphasize is that we also work outside of our focus countries as well as within those countries. And that's really seen through our various market development and enterprise support activities. We span beyond just those geographies and target both stove and fuel enterprises to provide grant opportunities and capacity building support. So this slide is just a sampling of some of the fuel enterprises that we've supported over the past few years. This is not inclusive of stove companies, and it's not inclusive of all of the fuel companies that we have provided support to, but it's just to give you an idea of the type of fuel supply chains that we've been trying to support in various geographies. So that sort of brings us to what we're presenting today, sort of setting the stage for today's webinar. In late 2016, we put out a call for fuel enterprises that were specifically focused on efficient biomass fuel supply chains. This was really the first time that the Alliance provided this type of support as a standalone opportunity for fuel enterprises specifically. So at the end of this, the Alliance selected 3 fuel enterprises to receive capacity building support specifically designed to help fuel enterprises strengthen their business models and overcome market barriers to scale, while also enabling them to engage more effectively with various governments and investors to increase support for more efficient and cleaner burning fuels. The capacity building support was provided by the Alliance's partner, NEA Consulting, which you'll hear about more momentarily. The support included not only desk support, but in-country site visits by NEA to work with each enterprise individually to evaluate and analyze their supply chains around their fuels, to identify fuel production and distribution potential, and to highlight ways to optimize their strategic targets and production methods in the most sustainable way possible. So we'll be hearing more about that in the coming slides. The 3 companies that were the recipients of this support include Engineering, located in Rwanda, which provides locally collected and produced sustainable biomass fuel pellets and gasifier stoves to the populations in Rwanda. Leacom, which their business model is really centered around integrated sugar production and utilizing those byproducts from local sugar companies to produce and sell ethanol, stoves, and fuels. And then Dazen, which has been operating in Bhutan with expectations to expand to Assam, India. And they've been working with rural households in Bhutan, providing waste wood in exchange for free fuel cookies and leased stoves. So you'll hear more about these various business models. And then at the end of this webinar, as part of this overall effort, the Alliance and NEA developed a handbook that's documenting the capacity building approach specific to fuel enterprises so that approach specific to fuel enterprises so that these enterprises can use this information to strengthen their own fuel production and distribution methods. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things, these are the panelists of speakers that will be speaking today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Luc Payen, who is a manager at NEA Consulting and who has been the lead consultant for this work.
Thank you very much, Sima. Yes, a few words about NEA to understand the role we played in this capacity building. So NEA is a French strategic consulting company specialized on energy transition. We basically help decision makers over the value chain to understand their environment and to grab market opportunities linked to energy transition. We are especially dedicated to promoting energy access since our creation 10 years ago, which is embodied by our NEA Access program based on 3 axes: energy access as a market. So we work for institutions on energy access. We also work for free, pro bono, for NGOs and and SMEs around the world, and we try to share the knowledge we developed in our work as much as possible. Is what we do here today. I'd like to thank the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves for asking us to work with these three wonderful projects over the last few months, with which basically we try to prepare a future scale-up, understanding the business model, going, as Sima said, through a field visit to really understand deeply how they work and develop methodologies to help them meet the upcoming challenges.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. Now we're going to go ahead and turn things over to the first enterprise presenter, Claude Mansell, who is the COO of NEA. So Claude, we'll turn it over to you, and Kavanaugh will turn the presentation ownership over to you as well. Great, Claude, you can go ahead. Oh, Claude, you can go ahead. If you could unmute yourself and go ahead. And
there we go. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Sema, for allowing us to share the results of the study that we did with NEA, which was sponsored by the Global Alliance. It actually helped us a lot in the current situation where we are from having done a successful pilot to preparing ourselves for national scaling. What you see here on this opening slide is our very first pellet production plant on the top, and on the bottom in the basket the final product of that pelletizing process, and the tier 4 stove from Mimimoto that we use at current to allow our customers to cook their meals in the most clean way possible at this point in time. So what I'd like to do is to share with you, for who doesn't know that yet, the business model that NEA has developed over the past. I think I'm going a little bit fast and showing you the results. Okay, here we go. This is the business model in the top left corner of the slide presented, which shows how our rural customers who we want to reach collect biomass, bring it to us, and receive in exchange for that the pellets that they will use on the stoves that we provide for free. So the whole business with our rural customers is a cashless barter trade, which is financed by the revenues that we get from the urban customers to whom we sell the pellets. So the biomass that is collected in the rural areas is then threaded in our collection hubs, and subsequently it is taken to our factory where we transform the biomass into wood pellets. And those wood pellets are then distributed to retail stores in the urban areas and in the rural areas. In the urban areas, we provide delivery service with a bicycle, and in the future we will make sure that the customers can pay through mobile payments. Therefore, they will probably not even have to leave their house in order to get the monthly pellet volumes. So this is how the model works, and it has all been set up to be able to supply the bottom of the pyramid with a very clean solution. We haven't found another way for customers to benefit from this the clean gasifying technology in another way. Of course, we are not at the end of our testing and piloting the market, but this is how we intend to start. So the concept has been proven in a pilot with 1,200 customers in the northwest of Rwanda, in selected villages, and we were able to reach a very good penetration rate in selected cells of of the city and in the rural areas. A high percentage, meaning we can reach between 50 and 80% of the market, and it all depends on how you price the pellets compared to the competing charcoal prices and any other solutions. So in our current proof of concept, we've developed a CRM system that captures all the relevant data from our customers and the sales of pellets. In the meantime, we have reached a carbon credit deal with the World Bank, which is allowing us to finance further growth. We are ready to do further scaling. We've ordered a new pellet production plant, which can be installed in the coming months. We have our senior team in place, and at this point in time, the government of Rwanda is fully endorsing our national rollout in Rwanda. So the key questions that we had at moving from the pilot environment with 1,200 customers to around 200,000 customers in 3 years were all around the optimization of our network. Our network is quite elaborate, as we have to collect biomass from our rural customers. We have to not only collect it, then we have to shred it, then we pelletize it in a more central location, and then distribute it back to the market. And the questions were, how many of those collection points do we need? How many collection points and shredder hubs do we need? How many pellet plants? How big should they be? So it's all a matter of how much centralization versus decentralization in the supply chain is optimal for us to aim for. So that was, and of course that leads to what capex is required for in the coming 3 years to scale up to these 200,000 households, and what are the operational costs along the value chain that we will incur under certain assumptions. So that was the question that we asked to NEA, and we were hoping that they could pull this answer out of their hat, and they were actually quite effective in getting all our assumptions and then putting it into their optimization model, which well, for us still is a bit of a black box, but apparently there's a powerful software that allows the calculation of the optimal network. If you don't have that software, if you don't have the tool, it's very hard. It's the only way to get to an optimum is by trial and error, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. I would like to design the optimal situation upfront and minimize our investment costs and our operational costs as much as possible. So with the assumptions that we gave NEA, they came up with a map of how our infrastructure would look like. This map is kind of copied on the left-hand top side, which shows the network of hubs. Of course, it all depends on the assumption that you put in there. For instance, where is the biomass sourced? What is our target market? And so on. In this particular instance, or in this picture, we looked at covering the whole of Rwanda, which is probably quite ambitious, and this is probably more the picture that we will have in 5 or 10 years time than in 3 years time. But for us, the question was more about the degree of concentration. And interestingly enough, on the left bottom part, you see the cost distribution along the value chain, and that gave us an indication which I wasn't aware of when we started about the importance or the weight of the transportation costs, even in the optimal situation. So for us, getting this optimization tool, plugging in all our assumptions has led to some insights that oh no, I'm in Jason's presentation already. I'm very sorry. Okay, so the benefits of the whole project were, I think, threefold. First of all, it was about the process, working with NEA in order to further express in very much detail how our model worked. They actually pushed us to come up with data around our model, that some of which we had to dig deep and to find sources of costs and of that were along the chain that we had not really identified yet. And we gained insight in the key drivers of the costs and how the optimal model might look like under these assumptions. We then asked NEA to help us with the transfer of the model, so that we keep it alive, because every day we learn about new assumptions, about new sources of biomass. And the value of the model is in updating it and learning as we go. So that is, in short, our business, the questions that we had to NEA, and the way that they added value to us in the current state of our growth.
Thanks, Claude. Could you actually go ahead and advance it to the next slide as well, so that?
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, here we go.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Claude. Luke, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, these are slides. My goal here is to highlight key takeaways from the capacity building we've done with Claude and NEA, which can be true for NEA, but it can be also a bit more global. I think that you understood that the context was quite clear, and the question Claude asked us was also quite clear. But I wanted to broaden it out a little bit. Because I think that it's important first to understand for all either SMEs and NGOs that over the past years, optimization tools that can be relevant for a fuel startup company have been made, more easily available for them. Open source codes are available, and then you need to adapt them to your exact questions and to your context. But there are already some open source codes that exist and that we used basically. So, for instance, within NEA, we used codes to solve what is called a factory location problem. There are other type of codes that are also useful, that could be useful for SMEs, for instance, vehicle routing strategies and so on. So that's something that is quite new, and that SMEs should be aware of. I think that, as Claude mentioned, I'll go quickly on that. This tool can be a great help to prepare a future scale-up. As Claude said, it helped him understand one of their future key activities, which could be transports, and that was not anticipated. But also it's important to have in mind the capital you will need, the capex you will need to raise the right amount of capital with investors and donors. And then I'd like to highlight a few best practices that are important to keep in mind when you use such tools and data. It's important to build a strong database about your company and your environment. And I think here, what's important is not. It's important to do it. We needed to do it for this particular problem, but in a way, for a company, it's really adopting what can be also called a discovery-driven course. You're going to have your list of hypotheses, and you're going to learn about it over and over when you develop your companies, and you need to go back to the list of hypotheses and change the assumptions. And that will help you on a business plan or on such a modeling tool to rerun the analysis and do a modeling trial and error to optimize your supply chain. Yes, and lastly, I really encourage any SMEs to use this type of tool as soon as possible to increase the value of the tool. Once you, I mean, there is path dependency on most of the supply chains, and the earlier you start modeling it and understanding the relationship between your assumptions and the results and the cost, basically the earlier you're going to make the best decision.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. Okay, we'll move over to Dazin now, and we'll hand over controls to Deepak.
Looks like Deepak is experiencing some technical difficulties. Please stand by while we try to bring him back into the webinar platform.
So while we work to get Deepak back on the line, Cheeto, would you mind if we just jump forward to Leocom's presentation?
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay, Kavanaugh's going to hand controls over to you.
Okay. Okay, great.
Hey, Cheeto, you should be all set.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Cheeto and I work at Project Gaia, and we are a nonprofit based in the US, but we serve as an incubator for entrepreneurs who are looking to start an ethanol stove business in Africa and around the world. So today I'm going to share a bit about Leocom, who we work with, who's based in Kenya. So Leocom runs a stove and a fuel sales and distribution business, and they import their stoves from South Africa, either as a fully assembled stove or as a flat pack, which is then assembled locally in Kenya. The fuel is sourced from one of the largest sugar factories, which is called Mumias Sugar. And their business model is really driven by a goal to supply locally produced stoves and fuel as cheaply as possible. So their goal is really to be cheaper than charcoal and kerosene, which are pretty widely used within Nairobi. Their target clients are low and middle income households, and right now the market size that they're targeting is about 400,000 households. And currently, Leocom is working on a Swedish grant that they received, which seeks to introduce new stove technology to Kenya. And Leocom has been working with their stove manufacturer to introduce that technology into Kenya. And Leocom, in terms of the assets and the inventory that it has on hand, Leocom today has a 25,000 liter depot and a 30,000 liter tanker truck that they use for their business. They also have 1,100 stoves in country, and they have a pending order of 1,000 stoves. So as you can see, they're still a pretty young company, but they've been making significant progress in terms of establishing the business. Okay. So Leocom has been experiencing a few challenges with regards to its growth plan. The first of which is they've been experiencing some capital constraints to meet their importation costs. I think this is probably not unique to Laocoon's business, but they do have to raise a lot of capital to import their stoves from Durban. And that's one of the drivers into their desire to really produce everything locally, from the stoves to the sourcing of the fuel. The second challenge that they've been facing is that of securing their fuel supply chain. So Laocoon felt that one of the greatest risks that their business was facing was that of relying on one fuel provider. And they were looking to mitigate that risk by building a micro distillery. Another challenge that they were facing was that of distribution. So today, Laocoon works exclusively with women's groups as their distribution channel. And these women's groups have been very active in terms of, making sales for Laocoon and interacting with the customer the most. But Laocoon has been thinking of different distribution channels, and they were looking to work with the NEA to figure out what makes the most sense for their target customers. One of the things that Laocoon was thinking of introducing was automated technology in the form of a vending machine that will serve as one of their distribution channels. And lastly, Laocoon was faced with the challenge of really securing their customer base. They operate in a very competitive market where there's a lot of charcoal and kerosene stoves. So they were thinking about how best to win over that market and establish their business. So the capacity building exercise was extremely helpful to Laocoon. I think they managed to really focus on short-term versus long-term needs through the whole exercise. And some of the key takeaways was that NEA really helped Laocoon to establish benchmark levels at which certain ethanol sources made sense to pursue. So for example, one of the lessons learned was that, if Laocoon is serving, say, under 100,000 households, then it makes sense for them to continue with their current strategy of sourcing technical alcohol from Mumia's sugar factory. And then when they then reach about 300,000 households and sales, then Laocoon can start really thinking about how to build a micro distillery, what kind of feedstocks to use for that. But the current priority right now should be to continue to use the available technical alcohol as it can meet their needs. Another lesson learned was, which is very interesting and very helpful to know, was that in the long term, Kenya does have available land that can produce enough raw materials to supply all Kenyan households with ethanol without competing with land used for food crops. But for now, production from a micro distillery would actually be much more expensive than the current available technical alcohol from the sugar factory. So again, the emphasis again was for Laocoon to, rebuild out their fuel supply as is, using the technical alcohol that's available. Another key takeaway was that of expanding their customer base, that should really be a short-term priority for Laocoon as opposed to focusing on diversifying its fuel sources. So one of the ways that NEA proposed for Laocoon was that it should focus on customer segmentation, and it should do this to establish an ethanol stove market. And Laocoon should really do this by focusing on the least price-sensitive customers, or help those customers to get subsidies so that they can afford the stove if need be. Additionally, Laocoon should actually continue to test new distribution channels. So as mentioned earlier, one of the distribution channels that Laocoon is considering is an automated dispensing unit. So that can be something that they can grow and flesh out and use for their urban household market. They can also pursue direct selling through plastic bottles. That they can do both for the low-income households or the rural homes, and also for the urban customers as well. And then they can pursue farmer cooperatives as another distribution channel, and they could work with those in the more rural settings. So yeah, the consultancy was very, very helpful in realigning short-term versus long-term goals for Laocom. And now I'll hand it over to Luke to go over the feedback.
Great. If you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, Cheeto, that would be great.
Okay, sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Luke, you can go ahead and begin presenting. Luke?
Yes, thank you very much, Sima. Yeah, I think I was muted. Yeah, I think Laocom, when we first worked with Laocom, and as Cheeto explained, there was a variety of challenges that were open, and we discussed all of them, but we really focused on the issue of the securing fuel supply, which seemed to be really critical for Laocom, as it was in their strategy, short or long term. That was the question, to develop and invest in a micro distillery. So we really thought that it was interesting to look at this project regarding the supply available in Kenya. And based on that on the experience, I would like to share a few takeaways. First, basically to analyze the supply available in the market, we used once again something that we did not invent it, but we use it from existing tools, which is a supply curve. And we think really that for a lot of SMEs, supply curves can be one of the most efficient tools to analyze the available supply. Basically, you have an example of a supply curve on the top right-hand corner. It is a graphical presentation, for those who don't know, of the relationship between prices on the vertical axis and quantities supplied and available for a given amount of time on the horizontal axis. So usually you have blocks like that saying you have source one, which is available for X quantity for a given price, and then the second source is more expensive. All of the different sources of supply are ranked by their price. And this is what we use, and this is very very useful to also visualize the supply. One of the limits when you go through this methodology is that most of the data that you collect is on production. So production that is already bought by customers, and you don't have the free capacities. So it can be useful to add, if you have time, and to ask the supplier about their free capacities, to add them on the graph. But it's also important to keep in mind that already having in mind all the available, all the production, even if it's currently used by another customer, gives you an idea of the cost and of who is in the market, and is already very, very efficient. For an SME, and as Cheeto highlighted, I think that the exercise is very valuable on both the short and the long term. Because at the short term, it really helps you understand what is important for you to do in the coming years when you are basically taking availabilities from the market. But as SMEs might scale up and grow, SMEs, fuel companies might shape the market and have a significant impact on the market. And then basically the outcome of the analysis might be different when you look on the long term with much larger quantities. Looking at that and looking at what is available, how and to which supplier also helps you understand if supply is an issue and accordingly to set the priority for a fuel SME. With Leocom, it turned out that on the short term, fuel supply was not an issue, and they could have, I mean, they had this basically freedom to work on building their customer bases rather than focusing and putting resources on the fuel supply, and that's something they should do. Other companies, for instance, when you are in an area working on pellets, and when there is no pelletization facilities in the country, you have to work on and dedicate resources on the supply, on securing the supply. But if you don't have to, that's a great opportunity to really only dedicate resources to building your customer basis. That was the case for Leocom.
Great, thanks, Luc. We're going to jump back now to Deepak to present the case of Dazen. So Deepak, Kavanaugh is handing over controls to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, GSCC and ENEA for providing support to Dazen. It has been a pleasure and eye-opening experience, particularly for Assam. So I'd like to start the presentation by mentioning about our motivation, why we went into the model of fuel plus stove combination rather than only stove model. So our starting point was that the best in the market, the best fuel available in the market are LPG and electricity, and they are both fuel, and they are both reliable and uniform in their quality. That means like whatever units are coming in 10 minutes, the user knows that this much amount of food will be cooked, and that's the reliable and uniform experience that we wanted to give to the people. And then another thing, if you talk about the stove sector particularly, is that same for LPG and electricity, is that it's actually easy way of monitoring if the stove is used or not, rather than if there is only stove and it relies on wood. Because if the fuel is continuously taken, and we know by collecting data that how much fuel average household use, then we get to know that the stove is properly used or not. So these were the three key motivations why we started. So our business model mainly relies on first of all collecting all the waste products from the sawmills. That's very important for us, because in Bhutan actually people the sawmills throw the sawdust in the rivers, and the way we approach them is not directly going to them, is by approaching the local environmental officer in that region and informing them that we have a very easy zero cost solution for you. The only thing we need is your support to go and talk to the sawmill together, so that there is low fee or no charge. So that means that we can collect from a longer transportation distance also, because we just pay the transportation cost and no cost for the sawdust, and also the collection packaging cost. Apart from that, it's mixed with the crowdsourced raw material that comes. These are the wood sticks that are collected from rural households, and the way they were collected are in cubic meter, because that's the most efficient way we have found to get the collection. So there's not much of a time waste in measuring the wood waste. So it happens in cubic meter. And both of these material come to the centralized location, and sawdust node is not required to be shredded, and wood waste is shredded and then compressed into fuel cookies in that another machine. and taken it back to the rural households once in 3 months, because they collect the wood waste for once in 3 months. So they have a minimum limit and maximum limit. And the way our model works is we work in a way that we have this methodology of using sense and respond. That means we see that which segment has the most interest in our concept and in our solution product, and then we respond to them. So what we learned in Bhutan is that the most interest we have got were from actually schools. And the reason is that the demand is over high, and it was also good for us because they are our paying customers, and we can continuously send like one truck per 1 month or 2 months depending on their requirement. So recently the education minister has got interested in our model once he has seen it working in a couple of schools. He interviewed the principals to see its benefits, and now he has made a recommendation to different schools to switch to our system, and it's up to us whenever we have funds to get more school stores, we can get that model up and running. For rural households, it has been going slow, and one reason is lack of funds for us to get the stores. But another reason is that we are in the mountain country, and it's a low populated country, so it takes a while to to get the raw material from one place to another. So that is the reason. But overall, the model, we have learned a lot from Bhutan, and the reason to go to Bhutan is actually do a stress test of the model. Can we make it financially viable in a place which is low populated and have a limited market in sales? Can we stress test the model so that we can use the learning from Bhutan and scale it in places like Assam in Northeast India, where there are not many enterprises working in this sector, and the problem of deforestation is severe. The population density is one of the highest. It's next to Bangladesh. It's similar to Bangladesh, about 800, 900 people living per square kilometer. And that's why we aim for expansion in Assam, and that's where we needed the support from NEA. What we needed is whatever we have learned and the assumptions, everything we wanted to tell to NEA and prepare a feasibility report for the district that we have selected. Identify right customer segments. That means that Bhutan and Assam, even though they are very nearby, we are talking about in a distance of 200 kilometers only, where our factory is presently located and where we want to locate our next factory. Even though it's 200 kilometers, the geography as well as the market looks completely different. So who will be most willing to pay? So that was very important for us to identify. And what would be the changes in our business model required as per the cost that will be incurring and financial revenue that will be coming. So these were the three requirements for us to identify from NEA. And what we have learned is actually one of the best eye-opening experience was that came out from the Excel tool that was made by NEA to see that how much is the cost that is coming, including the stove. Because until now we can only take the numbers inspiration from the fuel enterprise that are selling to the industries and using sawdust as a raw material. But our model is different. What we are doing is we are combining the crowdsourced material as well, and the stove cost is included, stove maintenance is included. So how much is the per kg cost, including the transportation, maintenance, delivery, distribution, and stove cost? That was an eye-opening experience, and now we can adjust and optimize wherever those costs are high. And also, surprisingly, in Assam, actually, it shows that restaurants are much bigger target group compared to schools or brick factories, and the rural households that you see in the graph are actually 10 to 15% of households that actually use LPG. So we also see that as a market, rather than just assuming that rural household will be just exchanging biomass. Yeah, and one more important lesson that we have learned is that it's very important if we are focusing B2C, like rural households in in rural sector for exchanging biomass, it's very important to have a customer segment which is not relying on stoves, because one of the biggest challenge in this model, similar to in NEA, is that you have to raise very high amount of upfront costs to get the stoves on board with us. So if we have one strong customer segment which is not relying on stoves, that quickly jumps up our revenue in the beginning. And for us, it's actually pot makers and brick factories that use a lot of coal that you see in the middle, as well as wood. So, and ultimately we have got a lot of clarity in our pricing strategy because of the NEA work, and now we are in a position of redefining and changing the business model, how it will look like, what model will be most scalable. Thank you for giving me opportunity to present, and now over to Luke to present the summary.
Yeah. Can you go back to?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you very much.
We can go through this quickly since we only have a few minutes left.
Okay. Yes, just to highlight that the work we've done, so really assessing the profitability, the potential profitability of the new market is something that all SMEs will have to do as they grow and scale up. And we really focused on the challenges regarding bartering businesses. We really think that they are quite specific, and we developed a tool that will be available, we'll talk about that later, to really help assess this kind of model. The few takeaways about that is that it's really important to work and assess currently the efficiency gains from the enhanced cook stove compared to wood solution, to set up an appropriate exchange rate with the rural households from which you get part of your supply. And then the second parameter, which is very important to adjust, is the marketing mix between cash paying and bartering customers. That's it.
Great, thanks, Luke. In the interest of time, I want to go ahead. I think we'll go through the latter half quickly, and I hope people can stay on for an extra few minutes. But since we have the enterprises on the phone, I'd like to jump to questions and see if there are any questions right now. Okay, so Claude, we have a question from somebody directed at you. The question or the comment is, Claude, it's a great business model, but people in the rural areas do pay for the stoves, correct? What price are you charging them? So Claude, if you want to unmute and perhaps answer that question.
Yes, thank you. We don't ask our rural customers to pay for the stove. So it's a cashless transaction. They bring the biomass, get the pellets, and they get the stove for free to be used. So that is the current model.
Great. Okay, the next question is for Luke. What is the tool used by NEA to model the CO2 emissions and cost-effective analysis? And then somebody else wanted to know what is the name of this software. I think that was in relation to the optimization tool for engineering.
Okay, so the first one was what was a tool to assess the CO2 emissions and
the cost-effective analysis, the CRM.
Okay, so regarding the CO2 analysis, we haven't talked that much about it, but we worked with all of the SMEs on the life cycle assessment of their product. So we used tools that we had already started to develop with the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stove on fuel LCA. and so we developed a tool dedicated for this work on the bartering model of pellets for NEA and on ethanol for Leocom to assess CO2 emissions, but also water impacts, fossil fuel depletion impacts, and so on. So that's what we use for the CO2. For the optimization tools, it will be mentioned and further developed in the handbook, on which we're going to work talked about a bit later. Basically, what is we used an algorithm that was coded in Python and linear programming software, which is open source, which is GLPK.
Great, thanks, Luke. It looks like we actually have a number of additional questions. A question, again, I think again for Luke, the supply curve was discussed. Was the demand curve evaluated too?
On this work, we only worked on the supply curve. I mean, we only worked to detail the supply curve, and then we incite Leocom to work more closely on the to get further data on the demand. But we didn't work on it as with a demand curve tool.
Okay, great. There are actually quite a number of very good questions that were put in the forum. So what I'd like to do is maybe work with Kavanaugh after this to collect the questions and send them out to each of the enterprises, and then maybe we can send out responses to the participant list, because I think there are a lot of really great questions that will be to everybody. We're actually at the end of the webinar, but I think for those who are able to stay on for just a few more minutes, we're going to go ahead and finish the presentation. Okay. So let's jump to the end. So Luke, I'm going to hand this, I can go ahead and advance the slides if you want to go ahead and start presenting.
Okay. So as Sima explained earlier, we worked on developing a handbook for cooking fuel enterprises based on the capacity building we've done. Basically, this handbook targets a variety of audience, not only SMEs. So of course it's going to be relevant for SMEs, but we also think that it's going to be relevant for NGOs working with SMEs to better understand their challenge and the way to help SMEs prepare a potential future scale-up. It's going to be also useful for investors and donors to understand also where more investment could be useful for SMEs, and to also understand, thanks to the LCA we carried out for the different projects, the impacts and the margins to improve the impact of the companies. And we also think that it's going to be useful for stuff companies to understand the relationship between fuel companies and stuff companies and how they can work together efficiently. As you, I guess, understood, we based this handbook mostly first on these three capacity building we just talked about, so in NEA, DASIN, Leocom, but it's also interesting and for you to know that we tried to put that into context with additional capacity building that we did previously, so in the from 2013 on, with companies like EcoZoom, SME Funds, so EcoZoom in Kenya, SME Fund in Nigeria, HGFU in Cambodia, working on char briquettes, EcoFuel Africa, and emerging cooking solutions. So it's really based on all the capacity building we've done, trying to put a thing into context. And then, of course, what is the content and what you will find in the handbook is contextualized, insightful cases, so that you understand first the context, then the solving methodologies, the results, the recommendations, and the limitations of the work we've done, which focus first, as we saw with Leocom, on widely assessing the supply. Then with DASIN, it was much more dedicated on widely assessing the market, the demand, and the potential profitability of a bartering model. And then with in NEA, we focused on the industrial and logistics infrastructure that the fuel company needs to develop, and which also can be relevant for all actors. All that will be presented in the handbook so that you can understand and adapt it to your own challenges and cases.
We're still, just to kind of wrap that up, thanks Luke, we are in the process of finalizing this handbook. It will be called Strengthening Supply Chains, a Handbook for Cooking Fuel Enterprises. And some of the tools mentioned by Luke and the various enterprises will also be housed on the Global Alliance website. So different fuel enterprises can not only read the handbook and sort of follow a bit of a step-by-step process to better understand and optimize their own models, but they'll be able to use a generic version of some of these tools to do some strategic planning and optimization for their own businesses. So there'll be a lot of tools available to specifically targeted at fuel enterprises. And this is all part of a larger effort by the Global Alliance to really build a toolbox of resources specifically focused on fuel companies. So in addition to this, a few months ago, we also held a webinar on a tool called FACET, the Fuel Analysis Comparison and Integration Tool, which is really a tool that was built to help assess the life cycle impacts of fuel supply chains from a more broad country perspective, but still relevant to a lot of the same audiences that you mentioned. That tool is already available on the website at cleancookstoves.org/facet, but do continue to check back to the Global Alliance website. By the end of July, we will post this handbook and the tools that were talked about in today's webinar. And I just wanted to mention a couple of upcoming events as we wrap up. So many of you maybe already know this, but in case not, the Global Alliance will be hosting our 2017 Biennial Clean Cooking Forum in Delhi, India, from October 24th through 28th of this year. The link to the registration website is cleancooking2017.org. And if you register very soon, you'll get the early bird fee. So please visit that website and let us know if you have any questions. And we also recently released a humanitarian clean cooking fund. The application process is now open and closes on July 21st. So you can also visit that link on our Global Alliance website.
And to add to Seema's announcement on the HCCF, the Alliance will also be hosting a Q&A session for applicants, and we anticipate that webinar will be held on July 12th. So please look out for the email announcing that webinar, and we look forward to having you participate in that as well.
Great. So with that, here's some contact information either for myself or Luke. As mentioned earlier, there were a lot of great questions that came in that we weren't able to unfortunately get to, but we'll work together here internally at the Alliance to get those questions to the enterprises and then send them out to the participant list. So if you have any questions specifically for me or for Luke, here are the email addresses you can contact us at. But I'll close just by saying thank you everybody for participating, specifically to NEA and the various enterprises. We hope that this work really translates to other fuel enterprises that are in similar phases of their business models or working across similar fuel types in their own specific countries to really help them strategize on how to scale up their own individual business models. So thank you again to everybody, and we will look forward to being in touch.